Part 1.
You will hear a telephone conversation between a customer and a shop assistant. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 3. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 3.
Good morning, Jenny's Suit Rental. Jenny speaking. How may I be of service?
Hi there. My name is Max Jones. That's Jones. And I'm looking to rent a suit out for a special occasion.
Certainly, Max. We charge a set fee for our services. You can either choose from our designer range and pay £50 to rent your suit out, or choose from our standard range at a cost of £25. So, what will it be?
Oh, the first option, please, Jenny. £25, did you say?
Unfortunately not. The designer range is twice that price.
Oh, in that case, I'll take the second option. Standard, was that it?
That's right. Now, before we go any further, may I ask how you intend to pay?
Do you accept checks?
Yes, but only in exceptional circumstances. We prefer cash or credit card.
Well, as I haven't got one, does this count as those circumstances?
Yes, that'll be fine. Make it payable to Jenny's Suit Rental.
Will do.
Before listening to the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 4 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 4 to 10.
Now, Max, can I take your measurements, please, and a few details about what sort of suit you have in mind?
Certainly.
Let's start with the trousers then, shall we? What is your waist size and leg length?
I used to be 32 waist, you know, but these days it's more like 36. Too many cream pies.
I've been there. And about the leg, 34?
I wish. I'm afraid I'm somewhat lacking in the height department. Not even a 32. 30, I'm afraid.
Never mind.
As for the colour, could you do a dark grey suit?
In fact, we have a very smart one of those in just your size. You're in luck. Now, what about shoes? Same colour?
No, I think I prefer something darker.
OK, let's go with traditional black then, shall we? What about size?
I'm a size 45.
By my calculations, that's 10 in our sizes. And style?
What have you got?
We do suede, nubuck and traditional leather.
Definitely the last one.
Very well. And will you be wanting a necktie?
Do you do bow ties?
Of course. I'll put one of those down in your order. Dark grey, I presume?
Perfect. To match the suit. I think I fancy a light blue shirt, by the way.
Might I recommend a green? Green would go very well with the suit you are renting.
Light or dark?
I'd say dark.
Dark it is then. My neck size is 17 and a half. Hard to believe that a little over a year ago I could fit into a 15, isn't it?
Those cream pies again, right?
You got it.
Now, what about your suit jacket? Same colour as the trousers, obviously, but what size?
Medium should be fine.
You sure?
Yeah. And have you got any of those 3-button ones?
I'm afraid not. The 1 and 2 button suit jackets are far more popular at the moment. In fact, the 1 button is all the rage.
Let's have that one then.
No problem. Now.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2.
You will hear a tour guide talking to her tour group. First, you will have time to look at questions 11 to 18. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 18.
So, here we are in front of the entrance hall on the ground floor of this rather splendid 20th century building, once the home of Lord Redford of Graves, but which now, of course, has been converted into the National Art Museum. Now, look straight ahead towards the end of the entrance hallway to where it narrows. That door will take you into the main exhibition hall. Alternatively, if you take the first right, you'll come to the modern art section, and next to that is the modern art studio, where you can see professional artists at work on their latest masterpieces. Fascinating! Taking a left off the entrance hallway, on the other hand, will lead you to the classical art section. If you look at the map on the entrance wall here, you will notice that there are 2 corridors running towards the back of the ground floor, one on the left and one on the right. They both lead onto the rear corridor, which is home to a further 4 exhibition rooms. On the far right, we have the landscape section. In the centre of the corridor is the still life section. And on the far left of the corridor, there are 2 rooms. As you walk down the corridor towards them, the one on your left is the history of art room, and the one opposite is the digital art room. Right, let's get started then, shall we?
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 19 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 19 to 20.
Our first port of call will be the digital art room down at the end. This exhibition has been open little more than a month, but has proved hugely popular with visitors so far. It is an interactive exhibition space, and visitors are encouraged to touch and feel the exhibits to their heart's content. Though, of course, I shouldn't need to remind you that this is forbidden in the rest of the museum, as is the use of cameras, so please ensure that you do not take any pictures once you leave the digital art room.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3.
You will hear a student Eric talking to his lecturer, Mrs. Harris, about some study difficulties. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hi, Mrs. Harris. I really liked your lecture, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Glad it was interesting. So, how can I help you?
Well, why do you think I need help?
You just don't look too happy.
I admit I'm having some difficulties.
About what?
Oh, it's hard to say exactly. All the reading is quite a chore, but I'm handling it. What really wears me down are the assignments.
The reading load is just part of the course, but sure, the assignments take more time, more effort.
And you know how you have to use what you read in your assignments?
That's right, that's the point of the readings.
Well, the reading passages also seem, well...
Boring?
No, not boring, but it's hard to connect it all, to remember what the readings are about, if you know what I mean.
Well, I'd advise you to write a small summary at the back of each reading text.
Really?
Absolutely. Basically, you don't want to be going through these texts again and again, and you'll need to refer to them often. So write a small summary, and when you revisit these texts, just read these.
I'm not too sure how to write a summary, though.
It's easy enough. The important thing is to check that you've written the main point and not just a list of details in order of their appearance. Details are not what matters, so again, don't make a list of these. That will just waste valuable time, and you're going to get very busy soon enough. Usually these articles argue a point, or otherwise have a certain purpose, so think all the time, what's the point and what's the purpose?
OK, and just write that.
Not just that. You have to think about the supporting points also. Then you might wish to cite some evidence. You can decide that yourself. But what's the most important thing about a summary?
That it's accurate?
No, that it's short. After all, it's a summary, right? So, main point, supporting point, some evidence, and most importantly, keep it short, okay?
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Well, those points about writing summaries sound useful, but what about the actual formatting of the summary, on paper I mean? Are there any other points I should know about?
Yes, there's a lot actually. It's very important to...
Write clearly?
Write the author's name.
But the author's name is in the text anyway.
But it must also be in your summary. And you must always lead with this. For example, Peter Brown argues that, and so on.
So the author's name is Peter Brown?
Yes, and the actual summary continues from there. And here's another good hint. Always write the citation details at the top using bullet points. This makes these details clearer and easier to see, and immediately means you're not plagiarizing the text. You are acknowledging the source, which is academic and required. This also allows you to quickly write these details down later if you paraphrase or quote from either the summary or the original text.
What details go in the citation?
The year of publication is obviously important, but here's another tip. Make sure whatever you're reading is not more than 10 years old. Anything older than that is considered too dated, since business theory moves on fairly quickly. You can cite older texts, but only under special conditions.
What are they?
Well, if the text is a very well-known book, a classic of its kind, but then you have to indicate that in your writing, acknowledge that the book is dated, but then give a justification about why you nevertheless felt the need to use it.
I see.
So you'll have a lot of summaries for all the texts, but with such clear formatting you'll be able to access information quickly. But make sure you store these pages in an order, of course, alphabetical. Based on the author's family names is the simplest method.
Or in order of date, chronological order?
That's possible too, but I'd say alphabetical is always the best.
My friends say chronological order has more advantages.
Any system is fine, provided that it's logical and that you can follow it and quickly access your summaries at a later date.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4.
You will hear a lecturer discussing the marketing and consumption of kangaroo meat. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 33. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 33.
When one thinks of Australia, one of the first images that comes to mind is of the kangaroo. This native marsupial is cute, unusual, and with the baby kangaroo, known as a joey, safely in its mother's pouch, it presents an enduring image often seen on Australian postcards and posters. Yet these animals breed prolifically and have been highly favoured by the widespread clearing of forest and bushland in the past to provide land for the traditional sheep and cattle industry. Ironically, kangaroos breed in such numbers, up to 50 million per year generally, that they have become pests. Consequently, for a long time now, there has been a yearly cull. In other words, their numbers are reduced with controlled and accurate shooting. And here we are talking of shooting millions of them. In the past, the carcasses were simply left out in the bush. Then later, some of the meat was used as cat food, and still is in fact. It is only in recent years that the meat has been used for human consumption, primarily for the overseas market, and one can see why. The meat is, by all accounts, leaner and tenderer than beef. It has a strong taste and minces easily, but it also has some more subtle advantages, and this is a topic I'd like to explore now.
Before you hear the rest of the lecture, you have some time to look at questions 34 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 34 to 40.
Now, there is a market, small but growing, for kangaroo meat. And one interesting reason to encourage its consumption is that it is environmentally friendly to do so. And this itself is for 3 reasons. 1. The traditional cattle and sheep, which mostly fill the rural pastures of Australia, are introduced species and somewhat destructive to the environment. After all, they weren't meant to be there in the first place. Their eating habits destroy the root systems of grass, their hard hooves tear open the ground, and their droppings are heavy and smothering to new growth. Kangaroos, in contrast, have all the opposite traits. They are a native animal existing in harmony with the natural environment there, so replacing cattle with kangaroos makes good sense. The other benefit is that, unlike cows and sheep, kangaroos don't produce methane as a byproduct of their digestion, and methane, along with carbon dioxide, is one of the primary agents of global warming. Finally, since there are too many kangaroos anyway, culling their population for their meat increases the biodiversity of Australia's wildlife. In other words, wallabies, quokkas, wombats and other native animals are given space to increase their numbers also, in the way that it was meant to be before the bushland was extensively cleared. So, one would think such arguments make the case irrefutable. However, there are some serious issues to overcome. The biggest problem is the way eating this meat is perceived. Many people still feel uneasy about eating what is, in effect, a national symbol, and a cute one at that. As well as this perception problem, kangaroos cannot be domesticated or raised within enclosures, as can conventional cattle. Kangaroos simply leap over fences, meaning that it is wild kangaroos that are harvested, which is not always efficient or cost-effective. This process involves trucks, shooters, spotlights, and many people to assist in transporting carcasses from remote locations. Finally, the public are not that happy with guns being the tool to cull these animals, arguing that it is inhumane. Professional shooters are, of course, trained, licensed, and follow a strict code of practice. They use accurate weapons and always aim for the head. The kill, in theory, is instantaneous, yet not necessarily in all cases. Thus, videos of kangaroo shooting taken by animal rights activists can cause great problems for the industry. Yet, what the public needs to realise is that, ultimately, all of their meat requires the killing of animals. And what happens in cattle abattoirs is, in essence, no different to what happens during the average kangaroo cull.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.